We are the largest employer in Singapore. A lot of our technology is based there. You can imagine from an age of practice basis. And homosexuality is illegal in Singapore. And yet, we have a LGBT network in Singapore. And it was formed by straight employees who formed it in order to advocate for their fellow employees. It took a while, but then all of a sudden the LGBT employees started coming out. And I don't know if you know this, I just found out about this yesterday from one of our more talented folks in the network who said that in Singapore, there's one day a year, it's called the Pink Dot Year, or Pink Dot, right? And he's sitting right out front. And Pink Dot, where you can come out and be openly gay, and nothing can happen. And I said, well, if we all knew about that in New York, could we know what day that is so we can come to Singapore on that day? So I think it's important for businesses to advocate, and that's especially true. I mean, obviously it's helpful in the United States, but in the European countries, but in the emerging markets, very, very important.
Tim, I'm sure that MasterCard has similar stories. Are there any that you would like to share of the ways in which, and I think Barbara said this so beautifully, on values, business can really be a leader, partly because of the value the government's place on you, not even as a taxpayer so much as an employer?
Yeah, it's a great question. There is, in our mind, a number of things companies can do, and I completely endorse what we've just heard. Companies have an obligation to state their values and to state them clearly, and in places where they can make influence to make the argument. And that's why for us, entering into this commitment with CGI and with Open for Business has been so essential. You need to articulate the value so there's no backsliding and so that it gives you a platform for discussion. I do think pragmatically there are places where companies can speak and there are places where it's more difficult for companies to speak. And often, for example, in my own firm, we are fairly small in many markets. We may have a team of 50 or 60 people in an individual country, and so the impact that you can make is sometimes limited. And I think we need to be pragmatic in terms of what business can do, as long as you've articulated a clear set of principles and are prepared to live by them globally. But even in places where it may be difficult to have the conversation with government, there are many other things we think that companies can do and should do. The first is to make sure that we are creating a safe space within our own communities for people to feel free to express themselves and their identity in all its forms, including their gender and their sexual orientation, so on LGBT issues in particular. So in other words, when you come through our door, the door of the MasterCard office in the morning, you are in a space where you're welcome and where your identity is celebrated, even if that is not the case in the wider culture. And so I think making sure that within our own teams we're continuing to create safe spaces for our people is just enormously important. And so, you know, we have business resource groups. We have about 11,000 people in our company, 6,000 in business resource groups. We're working so hard to take our Pride BRG, which is one of our most impactful, into markets around the world where it's not today. But in addition to safety, I think there are other things that government or that companies can do. Some are as broad as engaging in civil society and helping to support civil society organizations. I think there is a real correlation between strong, robust civil society and LGBT rights and issues, and I think there are places where companies can play productively there. And then frankly, I think there are ways we can also be living our values in how we deploy people and talent around the world. We make a conscious effort to make sure that we are as neutral and as free of bias as we can be as you deploy people. I think I know at MasterCard there are LGBT friends and colleagues in places that are not entirely LGBT friendly, but the reality is it's by those human contacts, by those folks on the ground, on the frontier, building relationships with senior bankers, with governments and others, that I think we can play at least a modest role in helping to advance this agenda, because the more those individual relationships are built, just like here in the U.S., the more LGBT becomes not the other, but it becomes me, it becomes my friend, it becomes my family, the more progress we'll see. Modest, but I think that's another place we are working.
So why are some of your colleagues not doing these things? I mean, why do you think there are some businesses who are not yet kind of where the two of you are, and what can we be doing to not only encourage but set expectations that this has to be
Leadership
normal?
starts at the top. So culture in any organization is set by the executive, the CEO. And if the CEO cares about this issue, it will permeate through the business. Our CEO is Jess Staley. He's a new CEO for us, but our previous CEO, Anthony Jenkins, cared tremendously about this issue as well. But Jess has an unusual story. Jess's brother is gay and came out, had AIDS, HIV positive, and in the early 80s, and became a principal in ACT UP. And Jess became, he was at JP Morgan at the time, a leader in business and an advocate and a principal for change in this area. So it was a natural, we were already, Barclays, very focused on this agenda, even more so now. How open can we be? How diverse can we be? When it has to come from the very top, but what's interesting is there are many different forums for CEOs. The fact we're having this discussion right today at CGI, that these discussions are being held, that we have come so far in just a 20-year period. But if it isn't at the top of the organization, if it isn't on the agenda, if you don't hire the right people to be advocates within the organization, you can slip back pretty quickly.
And so what can we do here? And I mean this not only for the CGI community, although I do mean it in that sense. I also mean for those of us that are not executives in the private sector, but that are activists and advocates, and all of us by definition are consumers. You know, what can we do to complement that, or at least to set the expectations for when a board is looking for the next CEO, that this is something that is considered?
Yeah, I think there's a lot that people can do. I mean, one is, particularly as a consumer, you can educate yourself and you can understand the companies that are leaders on these issues and others that are laggards, and you can vote with your feet in terms of your choices of what you consume and how. For people who are within organizations, I think there are real opportunities for leadership. I agree completely that there is the tone from the top and the agenda set by the CEO is transformationally important, but I've also seen in our own company extraordinary leadership from middle and mid-senior people who have taken really our CEO Ajay Banga's invitation for leadership here and run with it and continued to push the organization forward from the side, from sort of the middle center, by simply being relentless on the issues. So I think there are opportunities to lead in a whole variety of places.
Yeah, I agree. The network initiatives are critical, and most organizations have the network initiatives, but make more inclusive and ask for a meeting with the CEO. We'd like to sit down and talk to you about this issue. We care about it. We've noticed that MasterCard is doing this, and could we join this initiative as part of CGI? The worst someone could say is no, and then you know something about that CEO that you didn't know before. It is really important to engage, and most people actually just aren't thinking. They're so focused on the execution, the quarters, and the numbers, and the cost, and the revenues. They'll say, oh, of course we'll do that. What do I need to do? So show them the way. Believe they will behave in a positive way until they prove to you that they will not.
Yeah, well, Barbara, I'm a big believer in asking, and that the worst anyone's going to say is no, and that even that is quite revealing. So I couldn't echo that more strongly. Tim, I want to return to something that you said about how in places where you might have 50 or 60 employees, it's harder to be the type of partner that Barbara was talking about, that Barclays could be in countries in sub-Saharan Africa where they have a significant presence. Do you think that this is an area where CGI or another forum could help bring together at a more national or local level companies so that there would be more strength in numbers?
Yes, absolutely. I think we see that we see the power of network in everything that we do. I said to you earlier that core to our strategy is financial inclusion, bringing underserved consumers into the financial mainstream by giving them access to electronic payments. And it's exactly we get to that strategy often by doing just what you've talked about, which is how you build local partnerships for change with NGOs, with civil society organizations, and then with commercial players who want to play in that ecosystem. So I think there really is an opportunity, whether it's CGI at a regional level or at a national level, to think about how companies can that share the same values, to think about how companies can work together in this space. I think it starts, though, with a commitment to something like Open for Business, a common global commitment. You need, the danger of doing only local, I think, is that you can get sort of spotty execution. You need to set a standard. You need to say clearly and at a global level, these are our values. We are for LGBT equality. And we will push that as we can in markets around the world. So I think that global commitment's important too.
And how important is the public commitment? I mean, not only the global commitment, but the public commitment, so that you're being held accountable not only to a global standard, but then also kind of being held publicly accountable.
I think that's important. And I also think it's important to measure it.
Yes.
Because if it's measured, it's managed. And, you know, this is correlated, it's not equal, but it's the Women in Leadership Index we did, which was one of our commitments here at CGI, was for women in leadership, creating a publicly traded product, something we could do, where companies have either 25% women on the board or a woman CEO. You can think about calling out to people in a way that say, here are the top 100 companies, and here's how progressive they are on the LGBT initiatives. I think it's important to be public. I think it's important to measure. I think it's important to highlight best practices, and it's probably important to measure worst practices. And because if you've got a reluctant industry sector or geography, people want to be seen as progressive and engaging in shared value, shared growth, and being open. So I do think measuring is important.
And clearly both of you talked about talent as a main motivation for kind of why you're doing this, as well as it clearly being morally kind of the right set of choices to make. And Barbara, with that point about measurement, are you able to now see kind of?
Absolutely.
So,
you know, the best decisions come from having people in the room that are coming from different points of view. Even if they're arguing, we're going to get to a better place, and we'll have more fun doing it. So you have people from various backgrounds, you're beginning to see the talent, and they push you, right? Because the older you get, and I'm getting old, and even the older you get, you can get comfortable in your zone and you want to be pushed. So that talent's critical, and it's especially critical with millennials. In our industry, my business is, Barclays New York headquarters is 2 blocks down, 8,000 people. 70% of the 8,000 people in that building, that professional people in the building, are millennials. And they think very differently. And so you want to be on the cutting edge, and you must listen, you must be open, and you've got to constantly be new and to be inclusive.
I think I've seen time and time again at our company over the years that often the most compelling leadership comes from people who have been marginalized in one culture. It could be a job, it could be because they're LGBT and they're in a country where that, or in a family where that's not accepted, and where through a different job opportunity or what have you, a move of geography, they are given access to another culture where they can flourish. And if you find smart people and talented people and energized and dedicated people, and you've got an opportunity to help them shift mindset and culture like that, I think you get outstanding performance and you get deep and profound dedication. And so some of this, I mean, like anything in business, some of this is about it's about values, and it's about living and articulating your values, but it's also about driving the highest performing organization you can find. And I think that LGBT rights in particular globally give us an opportunity to differentiate and to pull in amazing people who can flourish in a new and different global environment like the kind that we can offer.
And how important do you think it is, Tim, for MasterCard as well as Barbara, for Barclays, that you are global, so that if people are LGBT, or if they're women, or if they're from indigenous populations or other historically marginalized populations in one country, you can provide them opportunities in other countries where they can stretch to the limits of their professional ambition while also being embraced and respected and not threatened or even tolerated for who they are.
I think it's critical. I mean, if you're a global organization, you have a global talent pool, and you want to be able to move resources, but I think it's beholden to an organization to hold its values and to be that bright, shining light wherever it is. We call that engagement. So wherever we are around the world, those are our principles, and so that's how we operate. And I do want to come back to the point that if you are a big employer in those countries where there is a more repressive regime, you have an opportunity to respectfully engage and to show them, no, this is what we do. This is how we operate. And people do care about the jobs. And you can begin to bend that curve, sort of an evolution.
Tim, any final thoughts you want to add?
Exceptionally well said. I agree completely.
Well, please give both Tim and Barbara a big round of applause for all that they are doing.